the small, forgotten town of Hollow Creek, nestled deep in the heart of the Appalachian Mountains, a chilling tale echoed through the whispers of the wind. It was a story that haunted the locals, a story known as the Dead Man's Hand. Legend had it that years ago, a mysterious stranger arrived in Hollow Creek, a man with a dark past and a deck of playing cards that seemed to hold an otherworldly power. His name was never spoken aloud, and his face was obscured by the shadows of his wide-brimmed hat. The townsfolk, superstitious and wary, kept their distance from the enigmatic stranger. One fateful night, the stranger entered the town's only saloon, where the air was thick with the scent of whiskey and the low hum of conversation. The bartender, a grizzled man named Jeb, watched as the stranger approached the poker table. The locals eyed him with suspicion, but the allure of a high-stakes game was too strong to resist. The game began, the cards shuffled with an eerie precision. The stranger's eyes, obscured by the brim of his hat, seemed to glow with an unnatural intensity. As the night wore on, the stakes grew higher, and the tension in the room became palpable. It was said that the stranger never spoke a word, but his cards told a story of their own. The townsfolk, drawn by the magnetic pull of the high-stakes game, gathered around the poker table. Whispers of the stranger's supernatural abilities circulated through the crowd. Some claimed he could see the future in the cards, others believed he could control the fate of those who dared to challenge him. As the clock struck midnight, the final hand was dealt. The stranger's opponents, their faces contorted with a mixture of fear and desperation, stared at their cards. The stranger, however, remained stoic, his expression unchanged. The tension reached its peak as the cards were revealed. It was a hand that sent shivers down the spines of all who witnessed it, a pair of aces and eights, a combination forever cursed in the world of poker as the Dead Man's Hand. The room fell silent, and a chill swept through the saloon. The stranger stood, leaving his winnings untouched on the table, and vanished into the night. From that day forward, Hollow Creek was plagued by misfortune. Crops withered, cattle died, and a shadow of despair descended upon the once thriving town. The legend of the Dead Man's Hand became a cautionary tale, a warning whispered from one generation to the next. Years passed, but the memory of that fateful night lingered like a ghost in the alleys of Hollow Creek. The saloon, now abandoned and decaying, bore witness to the town's tragic history. Locals spoke of strange occurrences, ghostly apparitions, eerie sounds, and the unmistakable scent of whiskey that hung in the air. One stormy night, a curious traveler stumbled upon the ruins of Hollow Creek. Intrigued by the tales of the Dead Man's Hand, he decided to spend the night in the abandoned saloon. As the wind howled through the broken windows, the traveler laid out a deck of cards on the dusty poker table. As the clock struck midnight, a presence filled the room. The air grew thick, and the temperature dropped. The traveler, undeterred by the supernatural energy, began to play a solitary game of poker. With each turn of the cards, the room seemed to come alive with a spectral energy. Suddenly, a cold wind swept through the saloon, extinguishing the lone candle that flickered on the table. In the darkness, a voice whispered, a voice that echoed with the weight of the town's sorrow. "You play with forces beyond your understanding," it warned. The traveler, his hands trembling, continued to play. The cards danced in the dim light, revealing a hand that sent a chill down his spine, a pair of aces and eights. The Dead Man's Hand. The temperature plummeted further, and the ghostly presence intensified. The room seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy. Terrified, the traveler tried to leave, but an invisible force held him in place. "You have awakened the curse," the voice echoed. "Now, you shall bear the weight of the Dead Man's Hand." The cards, now imbued with a malevolent energy, levitated before the traveler's eyes. The ghostly apparitions of the original players materialized, their faces etched with despair. The room filled with anguished moans and the sound of spectral footsteps. As the clock struck midnight, the traveler felt an icy grip on his soul. The ghostly figures circled him, their eyes empty voids of despair. The room seemed to warp and twist, and the traveler was consumed by the darkness. The next morning, the sun rose over the ruins of Hollow Creek, casting an eerie light on the abandoned saloon. The traveler was never seen again, and the legend of the dead man's hand lived on, a cautionary tale whispered in the wind that echoed through the hollows of the Appalachian Mountains. Hollow Creek remained a ghost town, its tragic history buried in the shadows of the past, and the dead man's hand continued to cast its ominous influence over those who dared to seek the truth.